Jake Martinez stepped off the transport ship and stared at the massive crystal spires of the Galactic Academy. The buildings stretched into the purple sky of Kepler 442b, their surfaces shimmering with alien technology he could not understand. His backpack felt heavy on his shoulders as he walked toward the main entrance, surrounded by creatures from across the galaxy. A floating jellyfish-like being drifted past him, its transparent body pulsing with blue light. Behind it walked a tall green creature that looked like a walking tree, its bark-like skin rustling with each step. Jake had studied these species during his preparation for the exchange program, but seeing them in person made his heart race. He was the first human ever accepted into the academy. Back on Earth, everyone called him lucky. His professors at the University of Colorado said he was making history. But standing here among beings that could think faster than supercomputers and survive in the vacuum of space, Jake felt very small and very human. The Academy's main hall was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, and strange symbols floated in the air like holographic displays. Students moved in groups, chattering in languages that sounded like music, static, or grinding metal. Jake pulled out his universal translator device and clipped it to his ear. "Attention, new student," a voice said behind him. Jake turned to see a six-armed creature with purple skin and large black eyes. Each arm ended in delicate fingers that moved independently. "I am Chancellor Veltar, head of this academy. You must be the human." "Yes, sir, I'm Jake Martinez from Earth," Jake said, extending his hand for a handshake. The Chancellor looked at his hand with curiosity but did not take it. "How primitive," Chancellor Veltar said with what might have been amusement. "Physical contact for greeting. We will need to teach you proper galactic etiquette." The Chancellor's translator made his words sound cold and formal. "Follow me to your dormitory assignment." They walked through corridors lined with strange artwork and floating displays showing star maps. Other students stopped to stare at Jake as he passed. He heard whispers through his translator. "Is that the carbon-based primitive?" And, "Look how slow it moves." Jake tried to ignore the comments and focus on keeping up with the Chancellor's long strides. They entered a tall tower and took what appeared to be a gravity lift to the 15th floor. The sensation of floating upward without any visible machinery made Jake's stomach turn. "Here is your room," Chancellor Veltar said, stopping at a door marked with symbols Jake could not read. "You will share this space with student Zix Thera of the Silicate Confederation. Try not to contaminate the environment with your biological processes." The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, Jake saw two sleeping areas separated by a clear barrier. One side looked normal enough, with a bed, desk, and storage units. The other side was filled with strange crystal formations that glowed with soft light. "Your roommate communicates through light patterns," the Chancellor explained. "The translation matrix should help you understand basic concepts. Do not touch the crystal formations. Your skin oils could damage them permanently," as if summoned by the conversation. A figure emerged from the crystal formations on the other side of the barrier. Zixathera looked like a walking gemstone with a humanoid shape made entirely of translucent blue crystal. Light pulsed through its body in complex patterns. The translator in Jake's ear buzzed and spoke. "Welcome, carbon-based life form. I am curious about your species. Do you really leak salt water when experiencing stress?" Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. "You mean sweating?" "Yeah, humans sweat when we're hot or nervous." More light patterns flashed through Zixthera's body. The translator said, "Fascinating. Such an inefficient cooling system. My species regulates temperature through crystal lattice adjustments. Much more elegant." Chancellor Veltar made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You will find, human, that your species has many inefficient biological systems. Perhaps you will learn something during your time here." He turned to leave, then paused. "Classes begin tomorrow. Try not to embarrass your planet too badly." After the Chancellor left, Jake sat on his bed and looked around the room. Through the window he could see the Academy's grounds stretching toward distant mountains. Other students walked along pathways between buildings, some flying, some floating, some moving in ways that defied physics. Zixthera's body flashed with new patterns. Do not feel shame about your primitive nature, the translator said. Even the most basic life forms serve a purpose in the galaxy's ecosystem. Jake wanted to argue, to defend humanity somehow, but what could he say? Compared to beings made of living crystal or pure energy, humans did seem pretty basic. He unpacked his few belongings and tried to make the sterile room feel more like home. That evening, Jake visited the Academy's dining hall. The vast space was filled with hundreds of species, each eating in their own way. Some absorbed nutrients through their skin, others processed energy directly from light sources. Jake stood in line at what appeared to be the only station serving solid food. Look at the human, he heard someone say. It has to physically consume dead organic matter for energy. How barbaric, another voice added. No wonder they haven't achieved faster-than-light travel yet. Jake picked up something that looked like bread and found a table in the corner. As he ate, he noticed other students pointing at him and making comments to their friends. He understood now why Earth had never been invited to join the galactic community. Humans were the backwards cousins that everyone tolerated but nobody respected. Back in his room that night, Jake lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. Zixathera's crystal formations dimmed as his roommate entered a rest cycle. Jake pulled out his phone and recorded a message for his family back on Earth. "Hey, Mom and Dad," he said quietly. "Made it to the Academy safely. It's incredible here, but also kind of overwhelming. The other students are amazing, but they think humans are pretty primitive. I'm starting to wonder if I belong here at all." He sent the message and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring his first classes, and Jake had a feeling they would be more challenging than any test he had ever taken. Not because of the academic material, but because he would have to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. Outside his window, the lights of the Academy continued to glow against the alien night sky, and Jake drifted off to sleep wondering if he was ready for what lay ahead. Jake walked into the xenobiology classroom and immediately felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes watching him. Professor Keithlani stood at the front of the room, her massive insectoid frame towering over the student desks. Her compound eyes glittered like black diamonds as she tracked Jake's movement to an empty seat in the back row. The classroom itself was unlike anything from Earth. Floating holographic displays showed rotating DNA helixes from various species, and the walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Students sat in chairs adapted to their unique anatomies. Some floated in containment fields, others extended root-like appendages into nutrient ports built into the floor. Today we begin our study of primitive biological systems, Professor Keithlani announced, her voice carrying easily through the room. The universal translator made her words sound crisp and clinical. "We are fortunate to have a living specimen with us." Jake's stomach dropped as he realized she was talking about him. Several students turned to stare, their alien features unreadable but somehow conveying amusement. The human species represents one of the most inefficient biological designs in the known galaxy, the professor continued. A three-dimensional image of a human body appeared in the center of the room, slowly rotating for all to see. Observe the numerous design flaws that have somehow allowed this species to survive. The hologram zoomed in on the human respiratory system. The breathing apparatus requires constant intake of a specific gas mixture. Unlike the Nebulan students here, who can process any atmospheric composition, humans will die within minutes without their preferred oxygen concentration. A student that looked like a contained storm cloud flickered with what Jake's translator interpreted as laughter. "How did they ever leave their home planet?" the Nebulan asked. "Crude mechanical life support systems," Professor Keithlani replied. "Rather than evolving proper atmospheric adaptation, they built primitive containers to carry their preferred environment with them." The hologram shifted to show the human circulatory system. Jake watched, mortified, as his own heartbeat appeared on the display in real time. The monitoring device he wore for the exchange program was broadcasting his vital signs to the entire class. "Note the central pumping organ," the professor said, pointing at the beating heart. "A single point of failure that, if damaged, results in immediate system shutdown. Compare this to the distributed circulatory networks of the Verdani, or the quantum fluid systems of the synthetics. A mechanical student with glowing circuits running under its metal skin spoke up. Professor, the inefficiency calculations are remarkable. The human brain uses 20% of total energy intake, but processes information at only 0.00001% the speed of a basic synthetech processor. More sounds that registered as laughter filled the room. Jake felt his face burning with embarrassment, and he knew the sensors were broadcasting that reaction too. Excellent observation, Professor Kethalani said. The neural network also requires complete shutdown for approximately 8 hours every cycle. During this sleep period, the organism is completely vulnerable and unproductive. Zixthera's crystal body flashed with patterns from the front row. The specimen also appears to leak sodium-based liquid when under stress. Is this some form of emergency cooling? Indeed, the professor replied. Another inefficient system. Rather than proper temperature regulation through crystalline matrix adjustment or atmospheric venting, humans use this crude evaporation method that wastes valuable electrolytes. Jake wanted to disappear. He could feel sweat forming on his forehead, which only made the situation worse as the sensors detected the increased moisture output. The display updated to show his rising stress levels, complete with charts and graphs that the class analyzed with scientific detachment. The digestive system presents perhaps the greatest inefficiency, Professor Kethalani continued. The hologram showed Jake's internal organs in uncomfortable detail. The organism must consume dead organic matter multiple times per day, process it through a series of chemical baths, and expel waste products regularly. The entire system is prone to contamination and failure. A plant-like Verdani student rustled its leaves. My species simply photosynthesize stellar radiation directly into usable energy. Why would any evolutionary system develop such complexity for basic nutrition? Primitive worlds often force inefficient adaptations, the professor explained. When a species develops on a planet with limited energy sources, they must resort to consuming other organisms for survival. It is quite barbaric, but common among lower-tier civilizations. The lecture continued for what felt like hours. Every human system was dissected, analyzed, and compared unfavorably to the elegant solutions other species had evolved. The immune system was described as a constant internal war against microscopic invaders. The reproductive system was labeled unnecessarily complex and emotionally disruptive. Even human vision was criticized as limited spectrum perception, with embarrassing blind spots. Jake sat frozen in his chair, watching his own biology being used as an example of evolutionary failure. His heart rate monitor showed spikes that the class interpreted as typical stress responses in primitive nervous systems. Every biological function he had never thought about was now on display as evidence of human inadequacy. The most fascinating aspect, Professor Kethalani said as the lecture neared its end, is how this species has managed to achieve basic space travel despite these limitations. They have not evolved past their biological constraints but instead rely entirely on external technology to compensate for their design flaws. A student that looked like living liquid in a containment suit raised what might have been a hand. Professor, will this species ever evolve beyond these primitive systems? Unlikely, came the reply. Their biological development appears to have stagnated. They show no signs of developing proper atmospheric independence, distributed consciousness, or efficient energy processing. They remain trapped by the same basic needs as their ancestors thousands of years ago. The bell chimed to signal the end of class. As students began filing out, Jake heard fragments of conversation through his translator. Imagine needing to consume solid matter every few hours. And that breathing thing, so inefficient. No wonder they were the last species invited to the academy. Jake remained in his seat as the room emptied, staring at the holographic human body that still rotated slowly in the center of the classroom. Professor Kethalani approached his desk. Do not take the lesson personally, human, she said, though her tone suggested she found his discomfort amusing. Science requires objective analysis. Your species serves as an excellent example of how life can persist despite significant biological limitations. My name is Jake. he said quietly. Of course. Jake. The professor's compound eyes reflected the light from the holographic displays. Perhaps you will find our next unit more engaging. We will be studying truly advanced biological systems, the ethereal collective's pure energy matrices, the hive mind's shared consciousness networks, systems your species could never hope to understand, let alone achieve. She clicked away on her insectoid legs, leaving Jake alone with the still rotating image of human anatomy. He stared at it for a long time, seeing his own body through alien eyes for the first time. Every breath, every heartbeat, every blink suddenly seemed clumsy and inefficient. Finally, he gathered his things and walked back to his dormitory. Other students moved aside as he passed, some pointing and whispering. Jake had become a living exhibit, a curiosity to be studied and discussed but never truly respected. That night, as Zixithara's crystal formations dimmed for the rest cycle, Jake lay in bed listening to his own breathing. Each breath reminded him of what the professor had said about his inefficient respiratory system. Each heartbeat echoed the criticism of his single point of failure circulatory design. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Jake wondered if humanity really did belong among the stars. 3 weeks after the humiliating biology lesson, Chancellor Veltar announced the annual Extreme Environment Survival Challenge. Jake stood with the other students in the Academy's main assembly hall, listening as the Chancellor explained the rules. Every student must survive for 72 hours on Tartarus Prime, the Chancellor said, his 6 arms gesturing at a holographic display of a harsh, rocky planet. This world tests your species' evolutionary advantages and technological integration. It is how we measure true academic worth. The planet on the display looked like a nightmare. Red storms swirled across its surface, and the reading showed extreme temperature variations, toxic atmospheric composition, and dangerous radiation levels. Jake felt his mouth go dry just looking at it. Each species will receive survival equipment, designed for their biological needs, Chancellor Veltar continued. The synthetics will get radiation shielding for their circuits. The nebulans will receive atmospheric processors for their gas-based forms. The Verdani will have UV amplifiers for their photosynthetic systems. Jake raised his hand. What do humans get? Several students made sounds that translated as snickers. Chancellor Veltar's expression might have been amusement. Humans will receive basic environmental suits, water recycling units, and emergency rations. Standard primitive species gear. That doesn't seem fair, Jake said. Everyone else gets specialized equipment for their advantages. Fairness is ensuring each species can utilize their natural capabilities, the Chancellor replied coldly. If humans had evolved proper survival systems, you would not need extensive technological assistance. Professor Kethlani stepped forward from the faculty section. Perhaps the human would prefer to observe rather than participate. Given the biological limitations we studied in class, actual survival might prove impossible. The assembly hall fell silent. Every alien eye focused on Jake. He felt the familiar heat of embarrassment rise in his cheeks, but this time it was mixed with something else. Anger. I'll participate, Jake said, louder than he intended. Humans might surprise you. More sounds of alien amusement rippled through the crowd. Chancellor Veltar nodded. Very well. Transport leaves in 6 hours. Prepare accordingly. Back in his dormitory room, Jake packed his few belongings while Zixthara watched with flashing light patterns. His roommate's translator conveyed concern. Are you certain this is wise, carbon-based friend? The survival statistics for primitive species on Tartarus Prime are not encouraging. I have to try, Jake replied, checking his basic survival gear one more time. The equipment looked pathetic compared to what he had seen other species receiving. His environmental suit was a simple, sealed garment with basic life support. The water recycler was about the size of a briefcase, and his food rations were compressed, blocks that looked like cardboard. If you die, will your family hold me responsible? Zixithara asked through patterns of blue light. I'm not going to die, Jake said, though he was not sure he believed it. The transport ship was massive, designed to carry students from dozens of different species. Jake found himself in a section with basic atmospheric controls, while other students occupied specialized environments. The Nebulans floated in pressurized gas chambers, and the crystalline beings rested in mineral-rich compartments. During the A flight, Jake overheard conversations between students about their equipment and strategies. The synthetics discussed optimal power conservation algorithms. The Verdani planned photosynthesis schedules based on Tartarus Prime's solar cycle. The liquid-based Fluidians talked about pressure adaptation techniques. Jake had no special strategy. He planned to find shelter, conserve his water and food, and hope his basic gear lasted long enough. It was not exactly inspiring compared to the sophisticated survival plans around him. "Attention, students," came an announcement as they approached the planet. "Deployment will begin in 15 minutes. Remember, this is an individual survival test. No assistance between species will be permitted." Through the ship's windows, Jake got his first close look at Tartarus Prime. The planet's surface was scarred, with deep canyons and jagged mountain ranges. Massive storms raged across continents, and the thin atmosphere glowed with dangerous radiation. "Deployment Zone Alpha 7, the ship's computer announced. "Environmental suits are mandatory for all carbon-based life forms." Jake sealed his helmet and checked his suit systems one final time. Around him, other students prepared in their own ways. The synthetics activated their radiation shields, creating shimmering energy fields around their metal bodies. The Nebulans pressurized their containment suits. The Verdani extended solar collectors from their bark-like skin. The cargo bay doors opened, and students began dropping toward the planet's surface in individual pods. Jake's pod was basic, just a simple atmospheric entry vehicle with minimal cushioning. As he fell through the toxic atmosphere, he watched other pods deploying specialized gear. Some released energy absorbers, others extended crystalline matrices for radiation processing. His pod hit the ground hard, jarring his teeth and making his ears ring. The hatch opened automatically, releasing him onto a landscape that looked like the surface of an alien hell. Rocky ground stretched in all directions, broken by deep crevasses and unstable-looking formations. The sky was a sickly yellow color, and his suit's radiation detector immediately began clicking rapidly. Jake activated his location beacon and began walking toward what looked like a stable rocky outcropping. According to his suit's display, the temperature was already climbing as the planet's sun rose higher. By midday, it would reach levels that could kill an unprotected human in minutes. He found a shallow cave in a cliff face and set up his basic shelter. The water recycler hummed to life, and he rationed out one of his food blocks for the first meal. Around him, he could see other students in the distance, each working with their specialized equipment. A group of synthetics had created an elaborate energy collection array that sparkled in the harsh sunlight. The Verdani had positioned themselves on high ridges where they could maximize solar absorption. The Nebulans floated in their pressurized bubbles, their forms shifting and adapting to the changing atmospheric conditions. Jake felt very alone and very primitive sitting in his cave with his simple gear, but he was alive, and that was something. As the first day progressed, the planet began showing its true hostility. Temperature swings of over 100 degrees occurred within hours. Toxic dust storms whipped across the landscape with little warning. The radiation levels fluctuated wildly, sometimes spiking to levels that made Jake's detector scream warnings, but the worst was yet to come. On the second day, as Jake was checking his water recycler, the sky suddenly turned brilliant. White, a massive solar flare erupted from the system's star, washing the planet in electromagnetic radiation so intense that it could be seen with the naked eye. Every piece of advanced technology on the planet died instantly. The synthetics collapsed where they stood, their circuits fried by the electromagnetic pulse. The Nebulans' containment suits failed, leaving them struggling to maintain form in the hostile atmosphere. The Verdani's solar collectors overloaded and burned out, cutting off their primary energy source. Jake's basic gear flickered and died, too. His environmental suit's powered systems shut down, leaving him with only passive protection. The water recycler stopped working and his communication equipment went dead. But unlike the other students, Jake was still functional. His biological systems did not depend on electronics or advanced technology. He could still breathe the recycled air in his suit, still move, still think. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Jake's primitive human biology was not a disadvantage. It was the only thing keeping him alive while the galaxy's most advanced species lay helpless around him. He looked out across the landscape at his classmates, scattered and vulnerable. The survival challenge had suddenly become very real, and Jake realized that everything was about to change. Jake stood at the entrance of his cave, watching the electromagnetic storm rage across Tartarus Prime's sky. The brilliant white light had faded, but the damage was done. Across the rocky landscape, he could see his classmates struggling with their failed technology. The nearest synthetech, a student named Unit 47 that Jake recognized from xenobiology class, lay motionless about 200 meters away. Its metal body was dark, no longer glowing with the internal lights that showed active processing. Jake realized the electromagnetic pulse had completely shut down its artificial brain. Further out, he could see nebulans trapped in their now powerless containment suits. Without the energy fields that held their gas-based forms together, they were slowly dispersing into the toxic atmosphere. Their desperate attempts to maintain cohesion looked like clouds trying to hold themselves in place against a strong wind. Jake's human brain, the same brain Professor Kethalani had mocked for its inefficiency, was now the only functioning intelligence system in the area. While the synthetics processed information faster than any biological mind, they needed constant power to operate. Jake's brain, running on glucose and oxygen, kept working even when every advanced system failed. He made a decision that went against every survival instinct. Instead of staying in his shelter and conserving resources, Jake left his cave and began walking toward Unit 47. The synthetech had been one of the students making the loudest jokes about human biology. Now it needed help that only a primitive biological system could provide. Jake reached the fallen synthetech and knelt beside its still form. The metal body was warm from residual heat, but all its systems were dead. Jake remembered studying the species during his preparation for the academy. Synthetics could survive in powered down mode for several days, but they would need external energy to restart their consciousness matrix. Using his basic toolkit, Jake began stripping power cells from Unit 47's non-essential systems. His human hands, which the aliens had mocked for their simple 5-finger design, proved perfect for the delicate work. Unlike specialized mechanical appendages, his fingers could adapt to different grip requirements and provide tactile feedback that let him feel when connections were secure. After an hour of careful work, Jake managed to route enough power to Unit 47's core systems. The synthetech's optical sensors flickered to life. Error. Primary systems offline. Unit 47's voice was distorted and weak. Unable to process current situation. You got hit by an electromagnetic pulse, Jake explained, continuing to work on the power routing. All the advanced tech got fried. I'm trying to get you stable until rescue arrives. Impossible. Human cognitive capacity insufficient for synthetech repair protocols. Jake almost laughed. Even helpless and half dead, the alien was still insulting human intelligence. Well, this primitive brain is all you've got right now. He finished the emergency repairs and helped Unit 47 sit up. The synthetech's movements were jerky and uncoordinated without its full processing power, but it was functional. Jake immediately started walking toward the next closest student. Zixathera was in bad shape. The crystalline being's body had started to crack from exposure to the temperature extremes. Without its technological temperature regulation systems, the thermal stress was literally tearing his roommate apart. Jake assessed the situation with the same practical thinking that had gotten him through difficult situations back on Earth. The cracks in Zixathera's crystal structure were spreading because of rapid temperature changes. He needed to stabilize the temperature somehow. Using his own body heat, Jake pressed himself against Zixathera's crystal form. His mammalian thermoregulation system, another inefficient human trait, automatically began working to maintain a stable temperature. Jake's body burned calories to generate heat when Zixathera's form grew too cold, and his sweat provided evaporative cooling when the ambient temperature spiked. Why are you helping me? Zixathera's light patterns were weak but visible. Your species values individual survival above group welfare. Actually, we don't, Jake said, maintaining contact with his roommate's cracking surface. Humans are social animals. We evolved to help each other survive. As Jake worked to stabilize Zixathera, he realized something important. The traits that the aliens had mocked as primitive were actually sophisticated adaptation systems. His body was automatically adjusting to help his roommate survive, without any conscious thought or technological assistance. Over the next several hours, Jake moved from student to student across the hostile landscape. His human endurance, built from millions of years of persistence hunting on Earth, let him cover distances that would have been impossible for species evolved in less demanding environments. He found a group of Verdani students whose photosynthetic systems had overloaded during the solar flare. Jake used his knowledge of basic chemistry to create a makeshift shade shelter using debris, and his understanding of angles and structural engineering. The shelter protected them from further radiation damage, while allowing enough filtered light for minimal energy production. When he discovered 3 Fluidian students whose containment systems had failed, Jake improvised containers using parts from damaged equipment. His spatial reasoning abilities, honed by millions of years of tool use, let him visualize how different components could fit together to create functional seals. Each rescue required Jake to use different aspects of human biology and cognition. His stereoscopic vision helped him navigate the treacherous terrain in low-light conditions. His ability to process multiple sensory inputs simultaneously let him monitor radiation levels, temperature changes, and terrain stability while working. Most importantly, his human capacity for intuitive problem-solving proved more valuable than any amount of processing power. While the synthetics could calculate optimal solutions given complete information, Jake could make good decisions with incomplete data, using pattern recognition and creative thinking that had evolved on a dangerous and unpredictable world. As the second night fell, Jake had managed to stabilize 6 critically injured students. He established a makeshift camp in a sheltered valley, using his understanding of basic physics to create wind barriers and thermal mass for temperature regulation. Started a fire using flint and steel from his emergency kit, something that amazed the alien students. They had never seen combustion used as a survival tool. To their technological minds, it seemed like magic, creating heat and light from simple chemical reactions. "How did you know to do that?" asked a Verdani student, whose name translated as Brightleaf. "Humans have been using fire for hundreds of thousands of years," Jake explained, feeding small sticks to the flames. "It's one of our oldest technologies. Unit 47, running on minimal power, observed the fire with its optical sensors. Primitive combustion reactions, highly inefficient energy conversion. But it works when everything else fails," Jake pointed out. "And I don't need replacement parts or a technical manual." As the alien students huddled around the warmth of Jake's fire, something shifted in their perception. The human they had mocked for his primitive biology was the only one among them who remained fully functional when technology failed. His inefficient systems were proving to be remarkably robust and adaptable. Zixathera's crystal form flickered with new patterns. "Your species is not what we expected. We're not as primitive as we look," Jake said, checking on his improvised shelters. "We just evolved differently. Where you developed specialized systems, we developed adaptability." The wind howled across Tartarus Prime's surface, carrying toxic dust and radiation, but Jake's small camp remained stable. His human planning and engineering skills, backed by biological systems that never needed software updates or power sources, had created a pocket of safety in the hostile environment. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Jake felt proud to be human. The traits his species had been mocked for were keeping everyone alive. The rescue ships arrived on the morning of the 3rd day, their hulls gleaming against Tartarus Prime's sickly yellow sky. Jake watched them descend from his position at the camp he had built, surrounded by 6 alien students who owed their lives to human primitive biology. Chancellor Veltar emerged from the lead ship, his 6 arms moving in what Jake had learned to recognize as agitation. The Chancellor's large black eyes swept across the landscape, taking in the scattered debris of failed technology and the small cluster of survivors around Jake's campfire. "Report," the Chancellor commanded as rescue teams spread out across the area. Jake stood up slowly, his muscles aching from 3 days of constant activity. "Electromagnetic pulse from the solar flare disabled all advanced technology. I managed to stabilize 6 students with critical system failures using improvised solutions." Professor Kethalani scuttled forward on her insectoid legs, her compound, eyes reflecting the firelight. "Impossible. Human cognitive capacity is insufficient for multi-species emergency medical protocols." Unit 47, still running on the jury-rigged power system Jake had built, spoke in its distorted voice. "Correction, Professor. Human Jake Martinez successfully restored my core functions and maintained operational stability for 47.3 hours using primitive tool manipulation and intuitive engineering." The professor's antennae twitched with what might have been surprise. She turned to examine the other survivors. Zixathara's crystal form, now stable and no longer cracking, pulsed with light patterns. The human utilized biological thermoregulation to prevent catastrophic structural failure, Zixathara's translator announced. His inefficient heating and cooling systems proved ideally suited for emergency temperature stabilization. Brightleaf. The Verdani student rustled her leaves as she spoke. The human created protective shelter using debris analysis and structural engineering knowledge. His spatial reasoning capabilities exceeded our botanical computational models. Chancellor Veltar walked slowly around the camp, examining Jake's improvised solutions. The fire pit, built with carefully selected stones to contain heat and reflect warmth. The wind barriers, angled precisely to deflect the worst of the toxic storms. The water collection system, using condensation and basic chemistry to extract moisture from the hostile atmosphere. "These are ingenious solutions," the Chancellor said finally. "But surely any species could have developed similar strategies given sufficient time. The electromagnetic pulse disabled our cognitive functions within 3.7 seconds, Unit 47 reported. Only biological neural networks remained operational. Of the species present, only humans possess the necessary combination of intuitive problem-solving, physical adaptability, and social cooperation instincts." Professor Kethalani's head tilted in a way that suggested deep thought. "Are you claiming that primitive biological systems proved superior to advanced technological integration?" "I'm claiming they proved different," Jake said, kicking dirt over his fire as the rescue teams prepared to evacuate the students. "Every species here has amazing abilities that humans could never match. But when everything goes wrong, sometimes you need systems that can't be upgraded, updated, or improved. Systems that just work, even when they're not perfect." The flight back to the academy was quiet. Jake sat in the same basic atmospheric section as before, but now other students kept looking at him with expressions he could not quite interpret. The mocking comments and whispered jokes were gone, replaced by something that felt like curiosity. Over the following weeks, everything changed at the Galactic Academy. Professor Kethalani requested a private meeting with Jake, something that would have terrified him before the survival challenge. "I owe you an apology," the professor said, her compound eyes reflecting the light from her office's bioluminescent walls. "My understanding of biological efficiency was based on optimal operating conditions. I failed to consider performance under catastrophic failure scenarios." "It's okay," Jake said. "You weren't wrong about human biology being different from everyone else's. I was wrong about different meaning inferior," Professor Kethalani replied. "I have been redesigning the xenobiology curriculum. Would you be willing to assist in developing a new unit on adaptive resilience in carbon-based life forms?" Jake found himself co-teaching classes within a month. Standing in front of the same classroom where he had been humiliated, he now explained human biological systems to fascinated alien students. But instead of being examples of primitive inefficiency, human traits were presented as elegant solutions to uncertain environments. "The cardiovascular system represents distributed redundancy," Jake explained, pointing to the holographic heart that had once been used to mock him. "Multiple pathways ensure continued function even when primary routes are blocked. It's not inefficient, it's fault-tolerant engineering." A Synthetech student raised what passed for a hand. But surely centralized processing is more efficient than distributed biological networks. More efficient, yes, Jake agreed, but also more fragile. Human brains can function even when damaged because processing is distributed across multiple regions. We lose some efficiency, but we gain reliability. The questions that followed were thoughtful rather than mocking. Students wanted to understand how biological redundancy worked, how human intuition functioned, how social cooperation had evolved. Jake found himself explaining concepts he had never thought about consciously. Zixathera attended every lecture, his crystal form flashing with patterns of curiosity. "Your species fascinates me," he told Jake after one class. "You are inefficient and efficient simultaneously. How is this possible?" "We're optimized for uncertainty," Jake replied. Earth was a dangerous, unpredictable place. Species that specialized too much went extinct when conditions changed. We evolved to be good enough at lots of things rather than perfect at one thing. The breakthrough moment came when Chancellor Veltar announced Jake's permanent appointment as the Academy's first human instructor. The ceremony took place in the same assembly hall where Jake had first been dismissed as primitive. "It has been brought to my attention," the Chancellor announced to the gathered students and faculty, "that our understanding of biological evolution has been incomplete. We have valued specialization and efficiency above adaptability and resilience. This human has demonstrated that there is wisdom in systems that prioritize survival over optimization." The hall was silent as Chancellor Veltar continued. "Effective immediately, the Academy's motto will be changed. Instead of excellence through advancement, we will embrace true intelligence adapts." After the ceremony, Jake stood in his new office, looking out at the Academy's crystal spires. His desk held course materials for adaptive biology in uncertain environments and social cooperation in survival scenarios. On the wall hung his teaching credentials and a small plaque that read, "Jake Martinez, Professor of Applied Human Sciences." Zixathara entered the office, his crystal form pulsing with what Jake had learned to recognize as excitement. "I have news from the Galactic Council. They have voted to establish an exchange program. Other academies want human instructors to teach adaptive resilience." "Really?" Jake asked. "How many academies?" "All of them," Zixathara replied. "It seems the galaxy has decided that humans are not primitive after all. You are specialists in the most important skill of all, surviving when everything goes wrong." That evening, Jake recorded a message for his family back on Earth. He sat in his comfortable chair, looking out at the alien night sky that had become familiar. "Hey, Mom and Dad," he said to the camera. "Remember how I was worried about proving that humanity belonged among the stars? Turns out we did belong here. We just had to show them what humans are really good at." He paused, thinking about the long journey from humiliation to respect. "It's funny. They spent so much time looking at what we couldn't do that they never noticed what we could do. We can't process information like computers or photosynthesize like plants, but we can adapt. We can survive. We can help each other through the worst situations imaginable." Jake smiled at the camera. "I guess that's not such a primitive thing after all. The galaxy is finally learning what humans have always known. When everything falls apart, you don't need the best technology. You need the technology that keeps working no matter what. And sometimes, the best technology is just being human." Outside his window, the lights of the Academy continued to glow, but now they illuminated a place where human biology was studied not as an example of primitiveness, but as a masterpiece of adaptive engineering. Jake had proven that among all the galaxy's advanced species, humans possessed something truly special: the ability to thrive when perfection failed. The galaxy had learned to respect the power of being just human enough.